Here comes the sun, do-do-do-do. Here comes the sun, and I say it's all right.
Hello, Fortitude audience. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Heather Kittleson, and I am your host, sitting with my co-host, Amos Kittleson.
Hello.
And today in our studio, we have Heather Erickson with us.
Hello.
Hello. Thank you for coming in to share your story and just be a part of the Fortitude family.
Thank you for having me.
You're
excited.
Your story is, we have not spoke about any children who have passed from cancer. And so today I know that this story is going to be near and dear to so many of our listeners, because this is a story that, to me, this is one of my big prayers, right? Mm-hmm. A mom's prayer. You never want to lose a child.
Right.
And there are so many of us that have in this world. And so thank you for being vulnerable to share this, because it is very deep and heavy. But Heather, if you could just tell us a little bit of who you are, what you do, your family, anything you want to share with us about Heather.
Well, I am kind of a born teacher, I think. I had many hats, but that's emerged as, I think, the gift that's been sent me. I, enjoy people and have always been very social and fun and rather maybe goofy. I don't know.
You are goofy. That's what I love about you.
But we never take life too serious. So, I think that's helped me on my journey too. But yeah, I currently teach 10th, 11th grade. My family, there's Calvin, he's 20, just to be 21. And then my son Ethan would have been 17. And then Maya is 15, almost 16.
Okay.
So we are very busy, but less busy than we used to be, because we're only chasing one child.
Yeah, I was going to say you have one.
Right, which is a big change, but the family dynamic just seems to evolve along with, your changes, and it's inevitable anyway. They're going to grow up and leave. So
yeah. Since I met you, your statement about being just bubbly and goofy.
Yeah.
Since I have met you, that is something. You are so approachable and so lovely in your demeanor around people. Like you just have this joy that exudes from you, and you relate to kids all the way to older people.
Oh, well, thank you for that. That's very kind.
It's beautiful.
My mom was a teacher as well.
Okay.
And she's 88 and she's very spry, probably in better shape than most of us. But, she's always taught me, how to treat people, and she's just kind of kind and goofy, and, exudes the Holy Spirit. And so I, am very grateful that I seem to have been a chip off the old
block.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. You come from how many in your family?
I have a older brother and older sister, and then I was the youngest by 12 years. So we have a different family too, because it's kind of a blend of older and then me and my family. So,
and support. I want to get to that when we start talking about Ethan's story, just from the family support systems and how friends and family, when you're going through that kind of thing. But thank you for what you do. I always want to say for teachers, thank you for speaking into the lives of our kiddos. It's tough to be a teacher, and you're good at it.
Well, thank you so much. That's, again, it's been a blessing, and I just, I take them on all as my kids when I say my kids, because you learn to love them in all their different ways.
Earlier we were talking before we hit record about you are currently teaching the classroom that would have been Ethan's. So it's Ethan's classmates, because it's junior, you're sophomore and junior, and how these kids just gravitate towards you in such a beautiful way, because it's almost like you're a teacher, but you have this beautiful respect or demand respect as Ethan's mom.
Yes.
That is a big deal.
It has been very therapeutic for me to have. I mean, you look out and you kind of see Ethan missing, but at the same time, It's like those kids know every day. Some of them, I get my hugs every day, every morning. It's kind of like they just call me their other mom. And one of the students said to me on Ethan's birthday this year, well, Mrs. Erickson, you lost Ethan, but you gained 27 others. So, they're just very present and very aware of that, they'll say, you've been through a lot, Mrs. Erickson. We know you try.
Oh.
And so they recognize that I'm mad at them in a way for acting, some way, but it's like your kid, like you can only stay mad for about 30 seconds.
Right.
Yeah.
You bring up a beautiful place to go before we even spoke about Ethan, and that is for teachers or for parents or for people who have lost someone, and so Ethan's class and then you, and you're in the same room, and sometimes people will say, I don't know what to say. Like, I don't know if I should say anything, if I should talk about him, if I should. And so you're saying that it means the world to you, like that the class and classmates will bring up Ethan.
Yes.
Share a little more about that.
And I think I've always been very open to talking about Ethan. And so I think that gives them the comfort of knowing that it's, it's okay. Maybe you get teared up, or we can laugh, and that's okay too. And that gives them the comfort of saying something as to, hey, remember when Ethan did this? And I think they know that it's comforting for me to keep his spirit alive, and they want that too. Like they think about, they want to help other people too, or reach out and not just me. So it's nice that his spirit works through the room, through all of them. And I see a lot of empathy and kindness in their eyes. And I think they're very willing to open up to whatever it is we're talking about with Ethan. And it maybe has helped them heal too.
The comfort that you bring them through their own sorrow, because maybe they didn't have someone around them that they could express that. So like you're just this extra level of it's okay to not be okay. It's okay not to miss Ethan.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, that's really beautiful.
Yep. And to keep his, love of sports, or we'll talk about, remember when Ethan did this in baseball, or, and so I think it makes them feel too like he's still there. He's still, he's still with them, even if he's not on the basketball court. Like with football, they all wore like their Team Ethan bands, and they want to have that game in memory of him, which they have done every fall since he passed.
Wow.
Yeah. And I don't ask that of anyone. It's like you just show up and they're like, hey, we're going to do Ethan's game next week. We're going to, have and I mean, I know they're doing it in honor of cancer too. Yeah. But they very much want it to be his story too.
They, in talking about Ethan, and before even, I don't think I ever had the opportunity to meet Ethan. Like when I was thinking back to all of that, right? Because we weren't that close in that, so not knowing how to approach a situation when you're not close with someone. But I remember hearing all the conversations, even from our kids and different people, just about how beautiful Ethan, his spirit was and is, and how just kind. He was always thinking of others and had this just beautiful presence about him. And I heard that all the time when you guys were going through all the battle. And again, that's your grandma or your mom.
My mom and then my grandma as well. Yeah.
I mean, just generational joy that you guys have exuded.
I love that. That makes my heart happy. Yeah. I think that's exactly, I mean, and my other children are too, but he just had this almost like a predestined gift from God that just made him who he was. So we could bask in who he was while he was here.
How old was he when he passed?
12. He was a month away almost exactly from his 13th birthday, which we really hoped he could get there. But
let's go there.
Okay.
2019 was when you got the news. So can you walk us through a little bit of what your journey has been like, or what you went through?
Right. Well, we thought Ethan did not enjoy school. He loved going to school, but he hated the learning part of school, liked recess and being outside and gym, of course.
Yeah.
So he had a flu, which we thought was a flu. And then he and my son Kelvin were wrestling on the floor, and he ended up getting a concussion. So he was out for a couple weeks because he couldn't get rid of his headache. And so he had this kind of combined out of school for 2-3 weeks. And it was able to get him out of the MCAs. So he was super happy about that.
Any kid would be.
And so that was like the bright side. But then we took him in again because he just was still feeling dizzy and had a stomach ache. And so our pediatrician said, you know what, I think it's time we send him to the castle, to the children's hospital, and let's get an MRI or, see maybe there's something else going on. And so that's when it was a Friday. And you're like up against the clock.
Mm-hmm.
So we get sent over and it was like 5:00. And then they had a surgeon on call that came up from, I don't know, a couple hours away. Anyway, he did have a tumor and they wanted to get it out immediately.
Where was it located?
It was right kind of in his abdominal wall, right below his small intestine.
Okay.
Kind of, and it was kind of wrapping around.
Okay.
So, which was causing him to vomit and things like that. He wasn't able to start passing things through. So, and then we waited. They sent it to biopsy. And so it was like that Monday after surgery. We waited the weekend. And when the surgeon and one of the oncology doctors came in and explained that it was called Burkitt's lymphoma, and it's very common in boys his age. Usually, I mean, not all boys, but it's more common, and they said it's very curable. It's just a very one of the fastest growing types of cancer, so we have to get in there right away and start chemo. And so it was very overwhelming trying to understand the disease. And then immediately, like later that afternoon, he was already starting his first round of chemo. So it was just kind of like a blur.
Yeah.
That afternoon.
Mm-hmm. Later that day, because they said with Burkitt's lymphoma, whatever is there, the cells can double in 24 hours. So it's like I said, it equally is responsive to treatment the other way quickly. But if you don't stop it where it is, it can, end up everywhere quickly. So
how did you all process that so fast?
I remember Aaron, my husband, being at work, and they put him on speakerphone because I wanted to know. I didn't want to wait. And so then he went to school and got my Ethan's siblings, Calvin and Maya, out of school. And so in the meantime, you're kind of walking in a fog almost, like you're in just your body takes over, and your adrenaline rush is like, well, now we need, you go into, okay, what do we need to do? Let's fix this. Let's get it done. Let's get this out of there.
Yep. Go mode.
Right. Which, I think that emerged as one of the hard things for me. Like looking back, you're like, why wasn't I more present to Ethan?
Oh.
We were so busy like asking questions and, looking up stuff and, less present to what he was going through.
Ooh, that brings up a really good point. If there's a father and a mother both present in those moments,
right,
maybe you divvy up those responsibilities and say one party to go take care of all the stuff and the other person go be with the child.
Right.
Yeah. And I wouldn't think about that.
We learned from that in that moment, like, from now on, it's not about us, it's about him and seeing where he's at and then becoming somebody else to, you do you take care of whatever it is, and that's okay.
Yeah.
But somebody has to be with Ethan, and he was very responsive to, be like, well, it is what it is. But yeah, you don't forget that moment when your child looks at you and says, am I going to die? What does that mean? And of course, as a parent, you're like, no. And the surgeon was there too. I mean, they say, no, this is a very treatable disease. You have removed your tumor and we're going to do what we need to do. And
make sure it stays away.
And it was very effective. He had some problems with his actual tumor, which I'm sure was a result of having chemo right away. And he had a strange infection in there. So he had more problems almost with his incision and than he did like the effects from chemo.
Okay.
But the regimen that they use is a very strong combination. So, it's not an easy road to watch them go through and to be so sick.
Well, and they're doing the chemo, which doesn't that kind of kill off your immune system, which is trying to fight that wound. And
yes,
so
it's exactly it. So it's like the chemo causes side effects, or in this case, his infection, and it's kind of like this rampant circle of fighting one thing, but then you're starting to deal with all the other things too.
Was he in? So he got diagnosed, and he was in. Did you have to stay in the hospital from that point on, pretty much?
Right. Well, he was in, I want to say probably 3-4 weeks because he did end up having, like I said, that infection. And then we would go home and he'd have his 2-3 times a week. They do blood work and things like that. So he got used to, well, this is what I have to do. And so he'd bring along his iPad and headphones and kind of just go into his own space. And then when we left, he was like the good old Ethan again. It's like, well, okay, I'm done with that. We're going home. And so he had 2 rounds of chemo. And then the third one, in between, they did a scan and it showed that there wasn't any cancer cells anywhere. So, it was a big win, a celebration. And my mom was there. I remember, we were all, ooh. And, it's just like a load off your heart. So at that time, then the big decision was, do we go forward and do another full, second set of, I think it would have been 2 or 3 more rounds after that of chemo.
Even though they cleared him. But this is like a precautionary just in case.
Right. Just in case there was some cells lying there or hiding in there.
Do you have to get 100% of the cells? Do you have to get them all?
No, that was their goal with Burkitt's. And, there's always things lurking somewhere, but nothing that showed up in his CT scan.
Okay.
So, but then they watch him super close, for anything in the blood work, because immediately then that would send off signals. So we were just going into summer then. And, we asked Ethan, and he had been so sick from, like I said, a lot of it was just his trying to heal from that wound too, but knowing that he would get these horrible, mouth sores and, the vomiting and just all of that and blood transfusions. So, you pray on it and you ask, well, we asked Ethan, well, this, what do you think? And we asked the doctors and everybody seemed, very positive about it. And so you just went about your business. And summer, he had his 30-day scan. That was clean. And we had a great summer. He was outside playing in the backyard, playing baseball and doing the stuff he did, spent time at my mom's cabin, and he was actually kind of excited to go back to school. And I was a paraprofessional within his class that year, so I was kind of grateful to have an eye on him. And then about 3 weeks into school, and he had started football, so he was in 6th grade football, wearing the whole full gear and helmet and everything, and we would just kind of chuckle because he was tiny anyway. But then after his treatments, he had lost quite a bit of weight, so he just looked like this, like a 3rd grader in.
And he diagnosed in 5th. He's in remission,
right? And
he's starting his 6th grade year.
6th grade year, okay. And then about 3 weeks in, ironically, it was the same exact day that we broke ground on building our new house. out in the country. So we were kind of, looking forward to that and absorbed in that. And I knew he wasn't feeling well. And I think it's more of a denial thing of, could this be back? But then, he's at school and his immunity is still compromised and his sister had been sick. So I kind of thought, well, Maya has been sick. He probably was too. But then I took him into his pediatrician and they're like, no, you should go, send you right over to oncology. And it had come back and spread in more of his bladder area and in his chest cavity. So he had several small tumors everywhere. And then by that it moved so fast. Boom, we were right back in, started chemo. But by that next day, they ended up he wasn't, going into the bathroom. And so it was growing quick enough where it was he needed to have stents put in between his kidneys and his bladder because it wasn't processing things. And the next thing you know, we were in the ICU. And 2 days later, he was intubated and was intubated for maybe 2-3 more weeks. And then it started shutting until he could get ahead, of the cancer, which it did start shrinking things almost immediately. Oh, okay. But then you deal with like all the excessive like fluids and the cancer breaking down, which was causing, and his kidneys weren't working right because it was putting that pressure on there. Mm-hmm. So I think the hardest part was his dialysis, which he was on for every day for, I don't know, 2 or 3 weeks maybe. Okay. And then kind of went down from there. And as his cancer shrunk, then things all started working again. And, but we were in the ICU for almost a month. It was like 3.5 weeks.
I remember that.
Yeah. So that was definitely the toughest part of the journey. And, he was so sick so quick that, I really didn't know if he would survive that just because of all the things that were shutting down and, the uncertainties. And then,
and ICUs are noisy.
They are very noisy.
You're trying to rest and everything's beeping and whirring. And it's like,
it's scary. It's a scary place.
How can anyone sleep and rest in that environment? And you're constantly getting woke up. Yep. So on top of everything, the ICU is as necessary as this layer of complexity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, for sure. And you are so exhausted that, you're just trying to function. And it's funny how you're, I think that's when I think I said to somebody, I don't know, one of our family members that was there, and I'm like, they're like, how are you doing you? Like, how do you function? Like, you're like on an adrenaline rush and you're present every time Ethan would stir or move or try to, he'd kind of get, I'm sure, like you said, all the beepers constantly going off, and then his dialysis, and they had to put in 2 different ports because then the one didn't work. And we had, it's a scary thing, but I'm like, well, that's when you say, it's like the hand of God just scoops you up and holds you and just keeps you right on to moving because, that's the only thing that makes any sense.
It's the one place you would draw all your strength from.
Absolutely.
Yeah. You were in the hospital for quite a while. How were things with Maya and with Calvin? Calvin. Yeah.
Well, my mom came and stayed with us. Okay. And so she kind of just became a permanent fixture. Mm-hmm. And then we lived in town then, in a smaller town. And so our neighbors and friends, just picked up and took over, giving rides, going to practices. And my mom and people would bring her meals, so she really didn't have to cook that much. And, they kind of we made sure one of us we were lucky enough to be within, 20, 30 miles. So one of us was home almost every night.
That's good.
So by the end of the night, it wasn't normal by any means, but at least, we'd try to do normal, make sure their homework was done. And be there at bedtime.
That's right. That life doesn't stop.
No.
That keeps going.
Tough.
That's hard enough by itself.
Mm-hmm.
We know this.
Well, yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, when you got to pick and choose, who's going to go to what event or, what parent's going to go there. But,
and to make sure emotionally available, whoever's watching, because your other two kids are going through so much emotion, especially with how close in age your youngest and Ethan were.
Right. Maya and Ethan were buds.
Yeah.
And then just the worry of, even though school and, everyone has their eyes on them, she's 10 years old. How is she, what is that like to process that? And I know they were, they're very afraid. And for Maya, she wanted to be with Kelvin or be with Ethan. And Kelvin was more of, it was so hard for him to be at a hospital and watch that, where he was more present when Ethan was home of, we're here, we're normal now. We're going to the hospital. It's just like a shock of, oh, this is real. It's happening. And nobody likes to be in a hospital.
And go ahead.
What was the most impactful thing that this small town did during this time?
Well, I think there were several, but just the random spur of the moment prayer vigils. They would, get people together and show up down at the local park. And, we would go if one of us was available and take the kids. And I think it seemed like whenever, I wasn't working. So it was like whenever there was, more of a need for, well, okay, we have, this bill coming in or, something to that effect. It was like the community would show up and say, hey, we did this huge fundraiser. Here's this check. Or, like kids selling pumpkins. And it was just a constant, like all these different ideas and just the meals and prayers and constant, like I said, not just taking care of us or Ethan, but just keeping their eyes on, wrapping Maya and Kelvin, where that's where we just, as much as you wanted to, you didn't have the availability to.
Yeah.
So, but so many times just faith and, finance, all of that, our needs were being met. And one of our nurses said, I've never seen a community come up with the things and do the things and the prayer vigils. And, she said it's exceptional and it's unique. And you guys are so blessed to have that.
Mm-hmm.
So
very much so.
And Ethan knew that too. He was very awkward about it just because he did not like being the spotlight and very much wanted to just fly under the radar and then emerge. Hey, I'm here. I'm home. I'm going to be out in the yard now.
Yeah.
For him, normalcy was so important. So sometimes I would get frustrated. Like, well, can't you just, our town had a big celebration and games and all these different things. And Ethan was like, no, I don't want to go down there because he doesn't want to be the focal point. And then I was like, wait a minute. Okay, this isn't about, we aren't going to worry about what other people see. It's what he needs from us. And sometimes that was really hard to remember. Yeah. It's like, oh yeah, that's right. It's not, we're like, oh, well, we need to show people our gratitude. And then after a while I was like, why people know we are, Ethan doesn't have to be, he did go down and have fun with his friends, but
that's probably good. That's good to know. Cause
really
like our small town, 750 in town and maybe 900 or 1,000 in the community. That you give, but you give like duty free, tax free, right? There's not an obligation to reciprocate with the thanks. It's like you give it. A true gift is a gift,
right?
And you don't want to add on to someone's already complex life and make them feel like they need to show up. So that's something that people listening to this podcast can, if they're going through that, just express that. Like you don't owe us a showing. Like go do your thing.
I think that's our human nature is, we need to reciprocate. Mm-hmm. We need to express what we feel for that, like, oh, it's bad not to send a thank you. Well,
you probably don't feel like sitting down and writing thank you notes.
The time and energy afterwards. In fact, after he passed, I gave up. I'm like, I don't have it. You just don't have it in you, and you don't have the time.
Right.
I mean, taking care of a sick child, even in a hospital, is a 24-hour job.
I would phrase it differently, of the giving up versus you just put a really good boundary up for yourself and what you can and can't do.
That's a really good point.
Because you did not give up. There's only so much we can handle.
Right.
And in order for you to look out for you, or even for the remainder of it's like your every day was consumed. And so now it's like, oh, I need to take a breath.
Just be.
Yeah. And so anyone who is expecting thank you cards from those who have lost people,
yes,
I would say probably move on and just know that they're grateful, right?
Absolutely.
Because it's not about them, really. And
that's one of the greatest lessons I think that we personally have learned is, it's just to be present, and that's enough in that moment, you know, because everybody's experiences things different. Some people enjoy having, that surrounding feeling of, people being here. I need that. Where Ethan was just like, I'm good just being here, and I have, my family here, and, some of my friends, and I'm just good just how I am. Just kind of, not that he wasn't grateful. He was extremely grateful. He just didn't, in his 11, 12-year-old mind, know how to process that.
That's a lot for any kid. I think about the age, and we have one that age. And I mean, even just talking through, why do you do this or why do you do that? Instead, you're processing, am I going to live or I'm going to die?
Right.
Like that's not,
unless I can't imagine what his little mind was thinking, or, you wish you did. But one time I did say to him, oh, Ethan, I'm so sorry. I wish I could switch places with you. And he said, no, you don't. Why would you ever think that? He said, I wouldn't want you to be, going through all of this because you have other people to take care of. So, just his ability to think it's more than just me, it's all of us.
We underestimate kids' abilities to process things like this. And I think our empathy just gets cranked way up for them. And yes, they're going through things. Historically, 12-year-olds were going through getting close to marriage, like entering into a lifelong relationship.
Prairie days.
Yes.
Right. And so we have the capability of doing that. We forget how capable they are. They're still growing. The prefrontal cortex grows until you're like 24 years old or something like that. We could get that. But yeah, I can just understand how their heart just starts to get twisted and turned and squeezed, and it impacts how you treat them. How would you respond to anyone who's going through that right now?
Well, I think the most important thing is just to try to keep, communication open. So you're trying to weed out, how are they really feeling? And more than that, what do they need from you? And maybe it is, I don't want my friends here. Not, well, why not? Why don't you want people here? Well, I don't really want my friends here because it's hard for me, because then it's a mirror of, I want to be playing basketball right now. I want to go to school and do normal things, and I can't. So that's a reminder of that I'm not normal, where when I'm just at the hospital and I can get on and play video games with them because we can hook up that way, then it's just like I'm at home in my living room doing my normal day, playing like we normally would. So, and, for other things, you assume that what would bring them comfort. And a lot of times it's the exact opposite.
Yeah.
So ask the questions.
Ask the questions. And that's, you can do it in a loving way, but then also to learn to be careful of, to not question why it just is. And then that's how they want it. And eventually, things come out and everyone's different. So you can't say, well, this is what you do when you are 12 and have cancer, or, in his, you're going through that with a whole floor of people of all from infants all the way up. And for him too, it was about recognizing how for that 4-year-old or 3-year-old, how horrible that must be because they don't understand. They can't be told by a doctor, okay, this is what's going to happen. This is why you're vomiting. This is why, you don't feel like getting up, where they don't understand that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And a lot of people who didn't have support, that would really bother Ethan. Like if a kid was, didn't have a parent, but because they had to work. Mm-hmm. So then he'd say, if I feel better tomorrow, I'm going to go play with them. So it was more about, hey, I might have it bad, and that wasn't just him. It just seemed like the perspective of going through this life-changing event. Yeah. Either, the kids just have this unique, they're just given a unique perspective that changes them even from a little age on, mm-hmm. or it's just that Holy Spirit working through and, just bringing that whole experience of people together. And then somebody does something for you, and then you see a need in someone else. And so it just is a gift that keeps on moving and giving.
In a very traumatic state. Isn't that, mm-hmm. It's so beautiful.
And, once you've, you don't even know those people that well, but you become family.
Yeah, you do.
Mm-hmm. It's a family you don't necessarily want to be a part of, but it's an amazing, a connection mm-hmm. that really sustains you long term.
We spent on 3rd floor of a hospital for 7 months, in and out of the hospital with Amos's brother. Right. And they became, they were at the memorial. It was such a family unit. It was beautiful what they go through and what they see, the doctors and the nurses.
They're a special breed.
Oh, they are special.
They have a gift beyond,
earthly angels.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. So be nice to them.
Yes.
Oh, absolutely.
It's just like there are a few people that you don't mess around with. You don't mess around with your barber.
Amen.
Because they do your hair. You don't make your tax consultants or your person doing your taxes mad.
That's right.
You want them to go the extra mile. Mm-hmm. You don't mess with your airplane mechanic.
Oh.
Or your nurses.
Right.
Encourage your nurses. They are mm-hmm. there to help, and you want them on your side.
Absolutely. And we experienced just, bonds with all of them.
Yeah. The emotion.
They're and for them to want to continue when you see what those kids go through and, losing patients that age, and yet they continue to just say, well, but the things we get back from these kids and from you as families is a gift to us too.
Yeah. The emotional roller coaster that the emotional ups for everybody involved. Mm-hmm. Right. Yes, he's getting better. Yes, we got it. Yes. Oh, It's back. Oh, it's like, because he was in remission twice.
Yep.
So he came out of that second one at full remission.
He did.
He's back in 6th grade.
Well, he never went back to school because it came back so quick.
But that's right.
It was, I believe, March. And I went back to school just as a sub. And then he was doing very well. So he enjoyed having some independence during the day, but he was very tired. So he'd sleep a lot. And I believe it was maybe 2 months, close to. He had gone back to baseball practice. So they had just started practicing for spring. And then he was going to go back for the last month of school. And he went in for one of his blood work appointments. And it was from, the week before, just like that, all of a sudden it was back. So, and then the plan became, well, he needs a bone marrow transplant because it had gone from a lymphoma to now a leukemia. So that became our next focus. And we went to the cities and he had his workup and to Minneapolis, and he was going to be at Children's there. as soon as he was done with, they do a new line of chemo to kill off basically all your cells. So it's a very tough regimen. And so he was just a week away from we were going to go to Minneapolis to have his transplant, and it came back within, a week or two. So that became the first discussion of, with Burkitt's and how it's moving. We need to look at some other options because we're kind of running out of things that are working. Yeah. It'll work short term, but it's not, his body's not responding. So then it became this whirlwind of, there's a place in, Cincinnati, or we send him to Texas to a hospital there. And, they had to try to find trials to get him into and that he would fit into. And so it was just this, preparing for being gone for at least 100 days and being away from your family, but having the hope that it was going, to be the answer with the transplant and all that, to just hoping and praying there's something out there. And so we did. And the beautiful thing about, the children's oncology world is they just have this network of, it doesn't have to be this hospital here. Yeah. We'll call every, we called St. Jude, we'll call, Massachusetts, and it's about getting that kid the services they need and that miracle. So, and our oncologist would say, is there anywhere else, that you want us to try? Is there anything, do you have any limits as far as where you would go or what you would do? So they did everything. And then, So, they'd say, well, he doesn't fit into Cincinnati, but we talked to this doctor and we're going to try these new drugs. And one was an oral chemo. And so it was like, he'd respond to that, but then his body just got so worn down. Yeah. And he just, couldn't stay ahead of it. And going into his last round, he actually looked really pretty good. And I had September, first week of school, everybody was off doing their thing. And he got to enjoy being in his new room and the new house. And so he was just kind of loving life and enjoying things. And so we went back in for the next round, and he would just get so sick from, the side effects. Mm-hmm. And then it was just one thing after are we fighting side effects or are we fighting both? And so, they're like, well, things, blood work is looking good. I mean, it's getting better. But then as you're killing everything off, then all the other things mm-hmm. happen. And then it came to a point where I was just praying that she said, well, there's one other option we can try. And he was in ICU because he just gets so dehydrated, and he was on oxygen because he just wasn't able to keep it up himself. So mm-hmm. they sent him back down to, as Ethan would say, the regulars floor. And still just doing his thing, doing his gaming, just as, upbeat as can be. And then the day they took us into the room, when you go into this little consultation room that it's like gloom and doom room because they bring in some of the ICU docs.
Palliative care.
Yep. And so we loved our palliative care team. They were absolutely incredible. And so, they're like, well, we'd like to try some hypnosis, and, knowing that he's, no matter what, he was still doing chemo, but just needed extra meds, needed that morphine, mm-hmm. and it became a really peaceful thing to watch. And I think that helped Ethan, but it helped us as well. Oh, and good. The palliative, he didn't process that, I don't think, but I became really close with the chaplain, and she was so present as well. And she just said too, there's just a piece about Ethan that, we can only explain as being from above, because he was just, oh, this is what it is, and so accepting, and I said also oblivious, but that was, I mean, I think that was part of also his coping mechanism, but, you know, then maybe it was a little bit of the painkillers and everything, but he was just so happy and, you know, just himself, just kind, happy, goofy Ethan. And then the doctor said, well, there's one more chemo we can try. It's something he's never had, something brand new. And because it was starting to fire up and it was in his spine. So we knew that once I got to spinal fluid, that's kind of your last, you know, that's the last part that you want it to do. Because now with neurology,
it's a tough word. Neurologist.
When it gets to the brain, it's
not good.
Yeah.
So I don't think he ever knew that, but Aaron was doing his thing with the siblings, and so
which Aaron is the dad.
Yes, my husband, and you know, that was hard for me to accept. Why am I always the strong one that has to, you know, why do I have to tell Ethan, okay, this is it, you are dying, and what you know, I'm like, why do I have? But looking back, you know, sticking to that, we needed to be where we needed to be was definitely in God's plan, because you know, my husband being the strongest person I know, just it's hard to look at your child and say, we're giving up on you, you know? So our doctor said to Ethan, well, you know, we have one more chemo we try, because it's brand new and it's something that, you know, we don't know, but it could be something that at least gets you through this hump. And then, you know, maybe we can get back to the bone marrow transplant. We don't know. But other than this, there's nothing else we can do. And Ethan said, what do you mean? If I don't do the new chemo, I die? And I just shook my head, and we both said yes. And he said, well, then get the drip hooked up. Let's go. So, you know, in that moment, I was praying to God, please just let him be okay with not doing chemo. But in that moment, I realized that, you know, Ethan that was his piece. Like, I don't want you to be any more sick. But for him, it was like,
I'm a fighting.
Yeah. What are we even? And then later he's like, why are we talking about this? Like, what the heck is wrong with you?
Even a discussion.
Yeah. And so then when I told Aaron that, you know, I'm like, our doctor would always say, I'm going to tell you when it's okay, not like when it's okay to say, okay, you know, when I don't think it's reasonable or beneficial. And so she's like, so they did. And he, you know, it obviously didn't work, because it was like 3 days later that he passed away. But I went home to Kelvin's football game, and that Friday night, and then Aaron called me at like 3 a.m. and said, his breathing's really weird, you should get here. So my daughter had a sleepover, and so her mom came and picked up her daughter, and then we shot off to Sioux Falls, and we all stayed overnight. And then he had like the spring back before the fall.
Yeah.
And he got, you know, the next day we were eating pizza and all hanging out, but we got to all be in the room and sleep in our recliner and whatever. And so then Colin and Aaron went home for a while, but Maya wouldn't leave. And we stayed, and like I said, he had a really good day. Yeah. And then later, Aaron and some friends of ours came up, and they had brought Kelvin. He was staying with one of his good friends. And Ethan was very medicated then, but he was still trying to game. And you could tell he was like trying to stay awake. And, you know, now we know that he was probably, you know, I mean, watching like when my dad passed away too, you see these moments of, are they crossing between? Or is it just, his medication? But he was playing, and then he threw his remote at Kelvin and he said, here, you play. I'm no good. Like, I'm having, he'd try to look and kind of open one eye. I think he was just, he had a lot of morphine. And then plus they were doing chemo.
Yeah.
So then
a lot of stuff.
We eventually stopped because the chemo that day was causing he had excess fluid, and it was putting pressure on everything. So we didn't tell him, we just took him off. But I mean, he was gaming and eating and happy up and, definitely not. I mean, he was so sick.
Yeah.
But I mean, for that moment, knowing now, I mean, even the doctors and nurses said, if you would have told me when I went home, on Friday that Ethan wouldn't be here Monday, I would have never guessed that.
Yeah. So it was peaceful.
Peaceful. And I just, I say, nobody says how, you don't pray for your child to die, but that in that moment I was like, just let him go to heaven and game.
Yeah.
And fish and so and
enough pain.
Enough. It's harder to sustain going forward with that than, and you saw the toll it took on your other kids watching him be so sick. So
Heather.
When my brother died, people would console me. I'd say, he got the upgrade. I miss him.
Right. That separation is so hard.
We're stuck here with COVID,
Amen.
And he got the upgrade.
That's right. I know. And so is, you feel bad feeling, that separation and knowing that, but where they are and, what you can't be sad about, he's just with a different, he's with a different dad.
Yeah.
It's such a different perspective when you have that faith. We've been around family who don't have that faith, and it's a different mourning process, isn't it?
It's real sad.
I cannot imagine. I cannot even fathom what that would look like
without knowing Christ, without having him to lean on. Yeah. And I really don't ever want to find out. And so for our audience, it's life. When you think about faith and you think about Christ and having your best friend with you every step of the way through these types of adversity and moments of life that you didn't expect, it's like having Christ and that unfailing love that holds you and your family and everyone together is so important.
And so mid-September, Ethan was going through chemo, and then he died October. So he was in the hospital about a month, but Aaron and I both had birthdays in September, a few days apart. So Ethan was working with one of the nurses to get him supplies because he was making cards. And then he was a avid outdoor. He loved the outdoors. He loved nature, but he was never like fishing was his thing. Like if there was one thing he could choose, it would be fishing, sports, whatever. But fishing was his thing. But he never wanted to eat the fish. He was always throw it back. And so if we did, he'd kind of hide, be like, we're going to have a fish fry. Do you want some? No. He just said this, like bugs, whatever, like you just treat life like life.
Oh.
And that's how he was from a little boy on. So, now too, we look back and we're like, oh, he was always a catch and release, and it would bother him so much. Like he went out into the woods after he had cancer, they went out into the woods with his buddies and his brother, and they were shooting rabbits. Well, he came out and he was crying, and he's like, I don't want to shoot a gun. And so one of his entertainment, you find entertainment where you can in the hospital, was in the spring, there was countless bunnies and birds. And so we'd, find all the different kinds of birds and watch them fly. And Ethan would run with me running behind with his pole, with his drip and all the other stuff. What was chemo? And we're running, chasing birds, but there were bunnies everywhere. And then there were baby bunnies, and they would hide run and hide in the bushes. And so that was always, nature was such his gift.
Aww.
And so now, a lot of the signs that we see are birds and bunnies. and they'll be in the most unique spots to remind you, just a bird sitting out in the middle of the snowdrift. And every time I'd open the front door, it was still there.
Oh,
so you're just like, oh, hi, Ethan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's his memory.
And those signs too, I just, not believing in, and not to say there weren't times where you were so angry of, why would God let this happen to children or to my child? Why aren't prayers being answered? And then, you look at those moments and you're like, prayers are answered every day here. I mean, the people around you, the nurses, how he acted, and those children all have just this unique peace and gratitude and happiness that they bring that inspire people, and that becomes your awareness that it's a gift in every day, that the presence is there. It's not in those, oh, he was healed overnight. I mean, it's in the aftercare of, bringing you that peace and support and love from others. And on our birthday, then he made us these cards and had drawn a bunny or a bird or whatever in it. And then he was an avid rock collector. So that was something that we would order him and find. And he really enjoyed going through his different polished rocks and all those things. So he was so excited for me to get back to the hospital that day. And the chaplain was in there, and she had brought him something. I was like, what are they doing? And Ethan said, Aaron and I were both there. And he's like, you want to open your birthday cards? Sure. Well, and here it was, a card that he had drawn, in his bunny. And it said, in the inside, it said, sometimes the one thing sometimes the one touch you need is love. And then he had a little tiny bag with rocks, some of his polished rocks in there that he had picked out special ones. And the one for me was shaped just like a heart, and it was pink. And then he had his reasons why he had picked things out for Aaron. And so he had these rocks taped in there, and it said, take these rocks to help you remember. So that's why we've kind of carried that forward as his message to others. And then I said to him, wow, Ethan, that's really beautiful. And I said, did the chaplain, did she help you with that? He looks at me, no. And she said, no, all I gave him was the baggies for the rocks. And I was like, wow, Ethan, that is so.
He thought all that through.
And I thought, wow, it was less than a month and he passed away. And I thought, that's got to be a God thing too. He was preparing. And then I think, or in his little mind, did he know? And he was more worried about helping us prepare.
Oh,
and so,
that's really
at his visitation and his funeral, we gave those out. We copied them out and bought some green glow-in-the-dark rocks because that was his cancer color. So a lot of people, that has kind of really kept me going too. People will say, hey, we still have your rocks hanging up, and we think of Ethan all the time. And that, those bad days, you just need a touch of love.
A touch of love.
A touch of love.
Oh, Heather, that's really beautiful. Thank you for sharing this whole entire story.
Absolutely.
We can end here by saying, go live like Ethan.
Go live like Ethan.
Spread the joy. Oh, thank you.
Yep. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks so much. Thank you so much for listening. We want to change lives through this podcast. And if you want to support this podcast or our guests, please see the links below for our Patreon and giving links.
And like and subscribe, and also share our podcast as much as possible. Thank you.
After we wrapped up our podcast, we kept talking to Heather and asked some more pressing questions and maybe some more sensitive questions. But we'd like to show that to you now. People say, well, I guess God needed another angel. Mm-hmm. And what your take on that? Pull your mic in, please.
That's a great question. I'm glad you asked me that, because before Ethan's story, my answer is always like, yep, I guess so. I guess that was their time. Mm-hmm. And just in visiting with other parents with different walks and different levels of their faith, and learning from other people as well, I say, I don't know that I can't say I believe in one thing or another, but as far as, God chose, him to, be his angel. And that very much, may be true, but I don't see cancer as, some people would say, well, it's just an evil lurking in there. And I always thought that's a horrible thing to say to a cancer parent or to a patient. And Ethan would say, so I'm evil? No, I don't think that, God necessarily would pick someone for that suffering. And I don't know the answer to that, but in my mind, in my faith has changed very much in that I live a very simple faith. And I believe that God is there in every moment, no matter what that looks like. He doesn't pick or choose. We're not special or unspecial. He's just there. And whatever that looks like, he's going to help you through. And for Ethan, he had his handheld cross, and, for him, it was very, very comforting. So I'm very careful about saying, well, I guess it was their time.
Yeah.
No, I don't think it was. Yeah. I think it just is. And God's there to give you that support and love in whatever that journey is.
It's interesting. I wonder why people think that. We live in a fallen world, and there is sin, and sin. Some people would say sin can manifest itself in sickness, and then they're kind of intertwined. And you live in this fallen world, and some people get sick, and some people die from that sickness. And it wasn't God's plan, because God's plan never was for the fallen world. Right. It's a consequence of the fall from Adam and Eve.
That's a very good way of looking at it. I hadn't thought about that.
Yeah. And so if people, the next step is, well, why God let that happen? Well, he gave us choice. And I think of like Nate getting leukemia. Was he 19 or 20 already?
He was 20.
I look at it and go, Nate did something. He didn't turn left or turn right. He didn't make it somehow Nate got leukemia.
Right.
We don't know why. And he wouldn't choose it, but he did. He got it. And Nate gave Nate leukemia.
Right.
Somehow. It was out of his control.
Right.
But it wasn't God that gave Nate leukemia. No. And God's will was that he be healed. And we saw him get healed through prayer. And ultimately it still didn't work for him. And we don't know why.
No. And in that healing process, asking those questions doesn't help you heal. It holds you back. So for me, it was, it doesn't matter why. It was. And now after the fact, you look at all the things you can do to make the good of that, like he would want us to continue to help other people and to reach out to other cancer families or to anyone that's having a difficulty, and to teach other kids like my classes or my own children that, these are the things that matter, having empathy and kindness and respect for other people and just gratitude for each day. Yeah. And whatever that looks like, because we all have tough days, and some unfortunately more than others, but that within, I always say, well, what's your rabbit or your bird of the day? What's your bright spot? And there's not a lot of, especially for a 12-year-old boy, he doesn't like to color. He didn't like the art lady. He'd be like, don't tell the art lady, not the, because he was not into any of that. So it was like, I like it when the zoo people come. So, you can find those bright spots. And I think that's God's will.
Yeah,
for sure.
We talked to someone recently who went through cancer as an adult. And this was, I think, in the last year or two. And as you know, recently there's a trend that combats cancer from the 100% the immune system side.
Right.
And some people call it a juice diet, or you have 12 juice shakes a day or something like that. And this person was talking to the oncologist, and she'd done her research on this. And she said at the end of her meeting, "Hey, what about this diet, this other way of this alternative form of doing it?" Mm-hmm. And she said, yeah, that might work. The oncologist said that might work. And the lady said, "Well, why didn't you bring this up?" She says, I don't have time. Mm-hmm. I've got meetings. I've got these all day long, and I don't have time. And so it was sitting in her lap, this knowledge.
Right.
And she didn't convey that to this patient. And I truly have not heard of really good outcomes of using that method.
Right.
But I also know how poisonous chemo is. Yes. And you go through it and you're like, that's the best we have? Yeah. That's barbaric.
We're poisoning we're poisoning our children. Right. We're poisoning our systems.
You're in a way taking over what God designed to do, the immune system.
Right.
And so if there's ways to like get processed foods out of your immune system so your immune system can do its job and not be focused on processed foods, right? Sugar is another thing. You get in there and they give you pudding full of sugar.
Yep.
In the hospital. Mm-hmm. So I just wonder, looking in the rearview mirror, if those are things that you had looked at, if you would have tried things like that, given the knowledge of that.
And I think there were a couple of different. Well, we had like the chemo diet, that you would look up on your own. Or like through Pinterest or whatever. It's like, what's good for these kids?
What's a chemo diet? Is that low sugar?
Yeah, lower sugar or, like making more things from scratch. Okay. But for Ethan, it became, we're going to let him have whatever he'll be able to eat because he was so limited between his mouth sores. And then when he felt well, then that's when we would try to, and he was a yogurt kid. So, we'd make like yogurt pops or like puree vegetable type things and freeze it and put it into, he would pretty much eat or drink anything. And so, that way, or like certain side effects. We used a lot of essential oils. And for him, peppermint worked for nausea better than a lot of the meds that they would give him orally. Mm-hmm. And so we found, you do those, or you talk to other cancer patients or parents, and they'd say, hey, try this. We just keep peppermint sniffing salts or, for like they'd get his feet and hands would peel really bad from the chemo. So, beforehand, if you eat, a lot of, use your B vitamins and then, just use like coconut oil and put it, that type of thing. And there were a couple different treatments that included more of like a natural supplement that we would give him on the side. I can't remember what it was called now. It was when he was going through one of the chemos, and I asked his oncologist about it. And the thing with Burkitt, and I mean, I think you're willing to try anything, and anything that would make a change without the poison.
It's so hard to, in that moment, you don't know what the future is.
Right.
And how do your oncologist is saying one thing and you've got the world or social media saying another thing.
Right.
And you're stuck in between. And what a stressful situation. Just recently, I was kind of in between my CPA and my CFO, my business. And they were saying different things. And I'm going, I just want to get everyone in a room together and talking so we can figure out what the right solution is here. And everyone's opinionated.
That's right.
And everyone feels like they're standing on firm ground. And you're in this just really tough situation. So I don't want to make light of that decision.
Oh, no, but you're exactly right in the time. And, people would say, don't Google Burkitt's or don't Google the whatever, because it's so different for everybody and side effects are so different for everybody. And so, I did to some extent. Of course, you're going to learn about the disease and learn about like when the leukemia. And I read about everything there was about, bone marrow transplants, and we all got tested and to see if we were donors. But at the other time, at the same time, it is a relief. Like I'm just going to live in this moment. And for me, it became the more I know, the more exactly that. What should I do? The more I know, the more uncertain I am. And we had one of the oncologists was more in research based. And then he did leave and he went to North Dakota just to do like children's oncology research. And so he was really open to, you kind of had an oncology team you would see. And so he was very open to looking at different things. And I would ask questions of, this is this an immune system thing? Because Ethan had a lot of eczema growing up. I mean, as a parent, you start looking at every little thing. Was that, it was severe. Was that an immune disorder? Was it, was it something that triggered it? And
gosh, you can't do that.
No. And then I realized that time-wise, you want to spend that time. You don't have, you think in the hospital you have all the time in the world, but you're constantly, getting them something or finding something for a symptom or, and I just let go with and just let the peace be. I'm going to be the best caregiver that I can be. And I don't want to be naive, but I'm going to trust that between Mayo and St. Jude and Massachusetts and all these other networks that somebody would know what's best.
Yeah.
And our oncologist, I think, was very honest in the fact that I want your child to live. If you want to go somewhere else, you go. I get it,
That's great.
But for us, it just became the availability of being there. And Burkitt's lymphoma is a beast. And like I said, we don't have the luxury of time. When it's doubling in 24 hours, you don't have time to sit and call different hospitals and get
different opinions. And
you start chemo now.
Yeah.
So you don't end up in the situation where he was in the ICU for 3 weeks.
When I had debilitating brain fog, I had my doctor saying one thing, and then I found a chiropractor, kind of a functional neurological chiropractor.
Yeah.
Who then approached it from a totally different point of view. And I was in a state where I can't function. I can't remember 4 digits for more than a couple seconds.
Yeah.
So hard to be a father and a husband and
to try to function that way.
Right. And so you get these, you just go, oh, okay, whatever works. This isn't working. So let's try this thing. And this is the chiropractic side was so new and unusual to me. I was skeptical, but ultimately that's the one that worked for me. It wasn't the doctors. And doctors are they're confident.
Yes.
That they have their way.
Yes.
And I just appreciate the challenge of that. And we're kind of stuck in the middle. There are times where I want to get my doctor, my massage therapist, and my chiropractor all in the same room and come up with a care plan.
Yep.
That should be a thing.
That should be a thing.
It should be a thing, right? I mean, and I will say, with Ethan's care in the as I always say, in the children's world, because we know people in the in the adult world as well, but in the children's cancer world, like his palliative care, we call them the pain doctor, and his palliative care team, the chaplain, the ICU doctor, the oncology team, the physical therapist. At least we had what I loved about it was you had ICU doctors there, or maybe you were in the ICU, but they'd say, okay, we're going to do our team round. And it was all of them, your social worker, and they would all in the rounds, they were all there
together. That's beautiful.
And because, then the chaplain might say, well, oh, wait, well, and the psychologist, even though Ethan was not having it until he had another little boy that was a couple of years younger, they came together. They would do therapy sessions together, which was amazing. I mean, I still don't know. She, didn't say, but she said they're doing such amazing things. And so, it'd be like, well, he did say this yesterday, or, we noticed this, but it would always come back to, we're giving you this information, but you're the parent. What do you see?
So he was doing psychological therapy sessions. Oh, that's amazing.
Yep.
I would love to be in that room.
Oh,
with that psychologist.
That is
with
the
all
one
those.
thing that, and this boy, I wouldn't ever ask him of it, but I just want to say to his friend, like, what did he tell you, Jackson? Yeah. And Jackson, in this particular boy, did have, he had a stem cell transplant, which he had reoccurring leukemia, and the stem cell transplant almost killed him, but he came through. Oh. And when he was in his really tough time right after the transplants, when Ethan died, and his mom said that he had a dream about Ethan. And so when he had talked, she's like, it's almost like he passed through on his way and said, you got this. And so now, he's 4 years past with no problem.
That's so beautiful.
Yeah.
Gosh.
And they were buddies. The hospital, he was a huge Marvel fan. They both were. And so when Avengers Endgame came out, I think that was one of Ethan's darkest days too. We were all going to go together as a family, and that's when his cancer had come back the last time. Mm-hmm. And on the day he went in, he's like, Avengers Endgame comes out today. And so his kidney doctor, his nephrologist, was just a kid at heart. He was amazing, and he had an amazing way with these kids. And my son Ethan was the avid Tom Brady fan, and he knows. I mean, he's a Vikings fan because we're from Minnesota, and he knows that. But he just loved the Patriots, and he loved Tom Brady. And so our nephrologist was a huge Chiefs fan, and they have this huge rivalry. So they always had that going back and forth. So that was fun. But he came in, and he's a huge Marvel fan too. And he said, Ethan, how would you like to see Endgame at the hospital? And Ethan was like, what? He's like, turns out we have this Disney machine. Like, no one really knows how to use it. So he's like, it's like a contract with Disney. We can stream movies, like now movies.
That's cool.
So he's like, give me a few hours. And so he and this other boy and his mom and me. And then he's like, and a few residents that are dying to see it. And then he had seen it. Yeah. So he's like, kept tapping Ethan on the shoulder. And he'd be like, wait till you see this. And Ethan was like, it's like, God, I wish he wouldn't have kept. He was like a spoiler alert the entire. But yeah, we were downstairs in one of their huge meeting rooms watching on the big screen, on this big screen. So it was, so many, again, like those people have a gift from God. I mean, he was unique, and he wouldn't, be in those situations. So, but I think the biggest takeaway too in all of that discussion is that you have to you really, number one, always question and know that you're, advocating for your child is not questioning somebody in a negative way. It's, you do whatever you have got to do. And then you have to let go and realize I did everything that I thought was right for him or her or whoever. And that goes for the adult world too. Yeah. And I think too, in knowing the piece of, you can ask why or what ifs. What do you, should we have?
Should we? Should.
And
then
shoulda,
coulda, woulda.
That's right. And that's when I just say, well, we put it in God's hands.
Yeah. That's beautiful. Thanks for expanding on all that.
Thank you guys.